I had the opportunity to ride along with Holmar's Catalog, who's one of the very few non-Tesla employees who has version 12 of the full self-driving software installed on their car, and he let me spend our afternoon choosing random waypoints around San Francisco to stress test it. I'm going to do my best to describe how it actually feels when you're sitting inside the car, and then a little later we're going to look at a couple of drives we did with both of our cars navigating the exact same route so we can get a real idea of differences between versions 11 and 12. A quick summary for people who don't keep up with this stuff. Version 12 is so important because it gets rid of the 300,000 plus lines of human written code that current versions of FSD rely on and replaces it with an end-to-end AI architecture that learns from real-world driving clips taken from good human drivers and then does its best to mimic that behavior. That means that there's no specific code telling the car what lane lines are, how to stop at stop signs or red lights, how to yield, or whose right-of-way it is. Absolutely none of that. It's more of a monkey see, monkey do approach, and saying it's a big change compared to how current versions work would probably be the understatement of the century. Many people seem to think that changing the way the system works from the ground up like this is a negative thing, but I assure you, this is just how Tesla operates. When I was an employee there during the beginning of the Model 3 production ramp, I witnessed engineers standing on the side of the production line watching in horror as the systems they probably spent months or even years of their lives developing were literally being removed with a hacksaw because they were slowing down production. The same thing is now happening to the autopilot team. Sometimes starting fresh is better than pouring massive resources into making something work better, and if there's a better way to do something, Tesla wastes zero time in doing it, which I personally believe is a major contributing factor in why they've become so successful. I have a feeling that in the not-so-distant future, we're going to see AI do many things better than humans ever could, which is a thought that really does keep me up at night. With all that said, let's get into my initial impressions of version 12. In a word, I gotta admit, it's incredible. It feels like the robot that used to drive the car has been replaced by a competent human, and all the little micro adjustments and odd steering inputs I've gotten so used to while testing the beta over the years are either drastically reduced or completely eliminated. It no longer feels like it's calculating what to do all the time, and instead it just does it. Even when the car was dealing with something unexpected that would definitely trip up current versions, like this light turning yellow while we were in the crosswalk, it behaved naturally and confidently. The full self-driving beta has been getting more and more smooth over the years, but this thing's on a completely different level. I kept waiting for the moment it was going to screw up and do a hard brake like it usually does when pedestrians walk out in front of you, but that moment never came. Here you can see it's not even stopping as these pedestrians cross the street, just a smooth slowdown and a smooth speed up. I can't overstate how much better the interactions with pedestrians are. It still treats them with additional caution, but doesn't feel scared of them anymore. This is something pretty hard to get across when you're just watching a video like this, but when you're actually in the car, it will become immediately apparent. There were some parts of the drive where it was truly hard to believe that the car was doing it all itself. Here you can see it completely ignoring the lane lines and drives this road the same way the human ahead of us does. I mean, I guess it shouldn't really surprise me seeing how the only thing it knows is human driving behavior, but to actually experience it in person is just crazy. It's also gotten significantly better at controlling for speed bumps. Older versions of the beta were pretty hit and miss depending on the type of speed bump it was, but version 12 seems to be consistently good. This is finally the version of full self-driving that your wife will let you use while she's in the car. I don't use current versions when I have my dogs in the back or there's people riding with me unless I'm on the highway or they specifically ask me, because it can be a rough experience sometimes. But this is more comfortable than the vast majority of Uber drivers I've ever had, which is something I didn't think I'd be saying about the beta for a very long time. And to me, the wildest part about all this is that during Elon's live stream, we learned that V12 has only been in development for about a year. 1 year of training this, and this is what it can do. Can you imagine what this is going to look like in another year or two from now? Or 5 years from now? Exciting times ahead indeed. But unfortunately, this is where the good news ends, and we talk about some of the regressions and problems a new architecture brings. The most frustrating one, in my opinion, is that it has a real hard time at stop signs, sometimes refusing to move forward at all. Holmar's mentioned it usually performs better, and from some of his videos it looks like that's probably true, but the reason it's frustrating is because I know it's capable of doing so much better. When Elon live streamed an early build of version 12, we saw it slowly rolling through stops at 1 or 2 miles an hour, ignoring painted stop lines when they didn't make any sense, continuing right away when it was the first to approach, and basically treating the signs like humans treat them. But I'm sad to say that is completely gone in this update. I know many of you disagree with me on this subject, but I think a self-driving car's goal should be to be as predictable as possible and to blend in on the road. And if 99% of people aren't stopping to 0 miles an hour because stop signs are overused, which is the case by the way, autopilot should be able to do the same thing. But instead, US regulators have forced them to make the car fully stop every time, which probably means using data exclusively from people who actually do fully stop. So it's no wonder it behaves so poorly and is so hesitant. The next regression is a little more serious. During the drive, I noticed the autopilot visualization wasn't displaying as much information as it used to, and the occupancy network that displays unknown objects seemed to be completely missing. Removing that does have some consequences. Oh. Version 11 would have been able to make that turn by going wide, no problem. But with version 12, it probably needs more data of similar situations and additional training. This actually happened more than once on this drive, and I have a strong feeling this is one of the reasons we aren't seeing it roll out to more cars quite yet. There was also one point we had a left turn coming up in about 1/10 of a mile, but the car got into the wrong left turn lane. Instead of owning up to its mistake by making the left and then rerouting, it takes the human approach and just goes for it once the traffic clears. It was a safe maneuver, and I really don't blame it for doing it, but it is another area that may be holding up the release of this to the wider fleet because there are regulations around it. And there was actually one more disengagement that happened during our comparison drives while the car on version 12 was following me, as you may be able to hear by the most obnoxious honk I've ever heard in my life happening right now. And we'll get into what caused it, but first, to ease you into this sponsored segment, I'm going to tell you a true story. A story that's so ridiculous that I had to change clothes. My wife recently visited her home country, and before she left, she downloaded some of her favorite shows to watch while she was there. But when she arrived, she wasn't able to watch any of them because they're not available in her country. That's right, she was unable to access things downloaded to her phone. Preposterous. Luckily, there is a solution for situations like this, which is private internet access. Virtual private networks not only let you access geo-restricted content on all major streaming services, but can also protect you against the prying eyes of hackers, internet service providers, and others who want to view your personal data by routing your online traffic through secure tunnels. PIA's server infrastructure is the best in the business, letting you spoof your location to 91 different countries and also all 50 individual US states, which you can use to get a better deal on buying things like flights and games. They have strict no-logging data policies, which have not only been proven in court, but is something you can verify yourself because they're completely open source. A single membership also covers an unlimited amount of devices, meaning you can protect everyone and every device in your household with ease. By using my link in the description, you can get 83% off and 4 months free, which comes out to about $2 a month. A really great deal for the features you're getting here. They have support staff available 24/7 and also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can give it a try completely risk-free. Thanks again to PIA for being a long-term sponsor of this channel. All right, ready?
All right, let's go.
This is the first time I've made a video like this comparing two different cars doing the same route, so if you have any comments or suggestions, please let me know in the comments, and I will do a summary at the end of the drive. For any of you that want to see the raw, uncut drives, these are available on Whole Mars Catalog's YouTube page.
Slowing down for a speed bump.
After the very first turn, there were a couple of speed bumps, and you can see version 12 doing a really nice job of slowing down, going a consistent speed over them, and then getting right back on the power after it's finished. Version 11, on the other hand, doesn't seem to think these speed bumps are worth slowing down for at all, and actually accelerates as it's going over the first one. It does handle the second one better, but I think that's just because the car in front of us has slowed down pretty dramatically, and not because it was actually controlling for this speed bump. You can see the red Model S running version 12 is making that left turn right now. Got pretty lucky that there was nobody in the intersection and it was completely clear to go. I also want to point out that both of these vehicles do have hardware 4. We obviously approached this stop sign before the car across from us, but it takes so long to get down to 0 that by the time it starts accelerating again, the other car gets confused and goes for it. I really don't blame them. It seemed very hesitant here. Also stops directly in the crosswalk while this pedestrian to our left was waiting for us to get through. I almost thought I was going to have to override the accelerator pedal there, but the car did make it through on its own. We're going to skip forward a little bit here as the version 12 car turns onto Chestnut Street, which is extremely congested.
Alright, now we got a left turn. AI driver is nowhere to be seen behind me. Presumably, his car got caught up waiting for someone. Alright, here we go. Chestnut Street, baby. Smoothly overtaking this truck. We got some oncoming cars. It's not fazed by that.
Pay close attention to how version 12 is handling all this, even with all the moving parts and pedestrians around, because in a second we're going to be doing the exact same thing in version 11.
Looks like that's a Ford F-150 Lightning we just overtook. Alright, looks like this guy is stopping. Very nicely overtaking them.
Kind of confusing whether this car was going to stop or not, and you can see it overtake as soon as they turn on the turn signal, even before they stop.
It's a little bit ambiguous whether they were going or stopping, but it did the right thing. Got a pedestrian walking across.
Another thing to keep your eye on to compare to version 11 is the steering wheel. Look how minimally it's moving during all of these interactions and through these intersections.
Got some people crossing here, and we got a truck blocking the road ahead. Alright, and we are going to go around it. Nice, smooth, cautious. 10 out of 10.
Gonna just quickly fast forward here until we get into the next intersection. This one has a lot of pedestrians around, which version 11 is gonna have to deal with next.
Okay, we got some pedestrians crossing. We got somebody in the middle of the street. Oh, here's another pedestrian crossing. They were occluded by the car, but FSD 12 still handled it properly. Here we got another car trying to go, but instead of stopping, FSD asserts itself.
Now let's see how version 11 is able to handle those same obstacles. It seems like it wants to go around this truck, but ends up just stopping in the middle of the road short of it. Now, our destination pin is actually a little bit beyond this stop sign, so that may have something to do with it, but I did end up having to override the accelerator pedal to get out of the middle of the road here, because it did not seem like it wanted to move. Then, as we do go fully around it, a little message pops up on the bottom of the screen saying that we've arrived at our destination. So I go ahead and remove this navigation point so that we can continue down Chestnut Street. Bit of a confusing interaction with the other car entering the intersection. You can see it brakes pretty hard as they continue through, but overall not too bad. Approaching another car with hazards pulled off to the side of the road here. This one is handled much more smoothly though, even though there's oncoming traffic coming. As we approach this next intersection, keep your eye on the steering wheel. You can see it turn right and then left, even though we're supposed to be going straight through here. This is a pretty common occurrence when the car is traveling at low speed, but something that version 12 does much better. It handles the steering wheel much more human-like. We also stop way too early at this stop sign, well before the crosswalk, and then just continue through. That seems to be another thing that just happens occasionally. I don't really know if there's a specific reason for it, but again, version 12 didn't seem to do that at all. As we approach the next pedestrian who's walking off to our right here, you can see it initially do a good job giving it plenty of room here, but then as it gets to the side of him, it turns even more into the oncoming lane, which did start to feel pretty uncomfortable. I mean, it was fine, better safe than sorry around pedestrians, but it's just another example of when the car feels scared of pedestrians. Quickly fast forwarding until we get to the next intersection, and again, keep your eye on the steering wheel movements here. There's really no reason for the steering wheel to be pointed any direction but straight. But as you're going to see in a quick second here, sometimes version 11 has a bit of a mind of its own when it comes to the steering wheel inputs. As it's our turn to go and we start to move through the intersection, we get a hard steering input to the left and then back over to the right. And a hard brake when the person to our right starts pulling into the intersection before it was their turn. So although I don't blame it for being so harsh, version 12 had to deal with many of the same obstacles and handled it very smoothly. In a second here, you're going to see the car in front of us turn on its hazards and pull off to the side of the road, which is perfect because that's basically exactly what happened to version 12. There's also some pedestrians on the right waiting for us to overtake this car before they go, but since we don't, they go ahead and go in front of us. But even after they cross, the car does not move forward, which gets us honked at by the human behind us and makes me override with the accelerator pedal. And unfortunately, things don't get much better at this next intersection. You can see there are some pedestrians crossing the street and other cars in the intersection, and after it all clears, there's plenty of moments where it should have gone, and it does creep forward slightly, but then just stops. It seems to be trying to yield for every single pedestrian that it can see. And since there was nobody behind us at this point, I figured I'd just let it do its thing and wait until it was ready to go, but it didn't seem like it wanted to budge pretty much at all. To get through areas like this, you kind of have to show your intention to pedestrians, which version 11 is not very good at doing. And the person calling me right now is Whole Mars, because he's been pulled over and waiting for me for quite a while. Version 12 actually finished this route about 50% faster than version 11.
Hey.
Hey, did you make it through?
Not yet. It's still trying. This has been a struggle, man.
Oh, really? Okay. Do you have any takeovers?
Not yet. Just a lot of accelerator overrides.
Okay. Okay, I sent you a pin for where I am.
Okay, and let's go ahead and get into the second drive. Since he beat me so bad during the first one, I insisted that I go first this time. After engaging autopilot, it comes to a stop even though it has plenty of room to go here, and usually I'd give it a little bit more time, but there was a car approaching from behind which made me override the accelerator pedal. And now, since we're first and there's a car separating us, I figured we'd have a pretty good shot of arriving to the destination first this time. And again, doesn't seem to make much of any effort to slow down for this speed bump. The next right turn we have to make is actually a blind one, and there's cars parked from both sides. This is something you typically want to creep out and get visibility for, and it surprised me how quickly it kind of shot out here, even though it didn't have good visibility on both sides. But it was very smooth. You can see there is a truck that is now separating us, and you can see version 11's turn signal on up there. Version 12 handling this speed bump much more comfortably. You can see it goes all the way down to 8 miles an hour and then starts accelerating as soon as it's over it. So in this next intersection, if you remember, version 11 just went through without really stopping at all and just kind of shot out there. But version 12 seems to be much more cautious at this blind intersection. There was also a pedestrian crossing the street, and he ends up walking pretty close to the car and right behind it, and the car stayed perfectly still as he was near it, but then as soon as he clears it, it does start creeping forward again very slowly. You can see a very slow creep here until it has good visibility, and then once it does, it goes ahead and completes the maneuver. Also notice how it's positioning the car more to the right-hand side of the road before straightening out the steering wheel so that it doesn't block incoming traffic. I am going to be skipping around here to the highlights because this drive was much longer than the other one due to dense traffic ahead, which you're going to see some big differences between version 11 and 12. Now, the car to our right does come to a stop first, and he has the right-of-way, but is not really taking it, or at least it takes him a very long time. He eventually does get through the intersection, and then we start yielding for cars we really shouldn't be yielding to. You can see, even with an open intersection, it's still very hesitant, and then the second it does decide to go, everybody gets impatient, and I do not blame them whatsoever. Let's take another look at that exact situation from the version 12 car behind. You can tell just how indecisive version 11 is here by just looking at the brake lights. And you can actually see version 12 anticipate us taking off and accelerate a little bit and then have to correct when we end up stopping again. And I must admit, if I was driving behind this car, I would be rather frustrated. The same kind of thing happens at the very next intersection. Right after this car passes in front, right now would be a really good time to go, but the beta is yielding to all the pedestrians around. And even after they pass, you can see it still wants to yield to other cars off to our left. It does seem like it wants to go here and starts moving a little bit more into the intersection, but then comes to another stop and gives the steering wheel a little twist there. It does seem like there were a lot of pretty good opportunities where it could have gone, but unfortunately version 11 does not seem assertive enough to do it. There's also another car that's separating me and Whole Mars behind us, so I do start feeling a little bit bad holding up traffic here for so long, and at the next opportunity I do go ahead and override the accelerator pedal to get through here. Because I know for sure it would have at least waited for this pedestrian in front of us to completely get through the crosswalk before entering the intersection, and I've already taken up enough time of the person behind me. I do try to give the car as long of a leash as possible, but I feel the pressure when people are sitting behind me for so long. And actually, funny enough, it wasn't version 11 that ended up upsetting the driver behind us. It was version 12.
Omar's getting into trouble back there.
Let's see what caused the longest honk I've ever heard in my life.
That's not correct.
It seems like as it was approaching, it thought it had to overtake that car, which was definitely not the right move, and is something I've seen really old versions of the beta struggle with quite a bit. This does cause a disengagement and a very pissed off human.
That's an issue that version 11 used to have in the early days, trying to go around cars that weren't stopped. And it's long since been resolved. But it looks like it reappeared in this version.
To be fair, this was the only time we saw it do something like that during all of our drives. There was a motorcycle that looked like he wanted to go around us until he saw the cop ahead of me and then changed his mind. So he's right behind me, and as we make this left-hand turn, there's some traffic that appears from the left and some harsh steering inputs you can see on the steering wheel there. We also end up in the innermost lane and then do a lane change because we have a right turn coming up shortly. And here's what that looked like from the version 12 car. It's going to have to deal with that same car that's approaching from the left that's not visible right now, but it does so a lot smoother than 11. You can actually see how jerky it is from the outside of the car.
Motorcyclist really slipping in between us. I'm not sure why. He needed to slip in between us. Alright, we're following AI driver, getting ready to make a right.
It still had to correct, but did so noticeably smoother. After we make that right-hand turn, version 11 stays in the rightmost lane and version 12 stays in the middle lane. You can see him pass us right now. Now, the reason I chose this route was to have as dense of traffic as I possibly could, because this dense city traffic when the cars are barely moving seems to be where version 11 struggles the most for me, and I have the most amount of disengagements. Being in the center lane was definitely the right call on this road because there is some parked traffic on the sides here, which is pretty common for San Francisco. Version 11 does a really nice and pretty smooth job getting around this parked truck off to our right-hand side though, so well done. I'll show you what I mean when I say version 11 has a hard time in dense traffic like this, but first, let's watch version 12.
Very nice. We're half a mile away from Fell Street now, where we have to turn left. The street is very crowded. You can see it's filled with traffic.
Watch how smooth it is even when the driver in front makes an abrupt stop.
It almost looks as red as it looks on the map.
Now let's take a look at a similar situation in my car. Very harsh and unnecessary brake here, and that's the kind of move that'll get you rear-ended if somebody's following too close. Now let's compare how they each exit this crowded street, because they're both going to have to deal with some traffic and some pedestrians.
Okay, now would have been a good time too. Oh, what the hell? This guy's such an idiot. What the hell is he doing? Okay, it did actually get over there.
And again, try to keep your eye on the steering wheel as it's doing this left turn. That's where you're going to notice the biggest differences.
And now we got a left with a lot of pedestrian traffic. Oh, someone's crossing. And boom, even though it was a yellow. FSD 11 would sometimes get confused by that. If it was yellow, it would sometimes stop in the middle of the intersection and refuse to go. So that was very good.
Now let's take a look at the version 11 experience. It starts off with a harsh brake that made me immediately override the accelerator pedal to not get rear-ended by the car behind us. Then does pick a pretty good moment to get over into this left-hand lane to complete the left turn. That harsh brake was probably caused by the motorcyclist that went in front of us, but still pretty unacceptable. You can see the steering wheel getting a little bit jerky as we're approaching and as pedestrians are walking through the crosswalk. It's almost like it's recalculating how to get around them all the time, and the steering wheel just is not staying still. My foot did go up there in case I needed to give it another accelerator press to get out of this intersection, but luckily it handled it all on its own. Now let's see how they compare when there's some minor road work going on ahead and it has to get over a couple of lanes.
All right, nice. We got some road work. We've got a van. We got a truck. We got this guy trying to pull in front of us. Nice. Very good.
I agree with Holmars there. Very nicely handled and a comfortable experience. Version 11, on the other hand, comes flying into this construction zone much too quickly to be comfortable.
Jesus.
And after behaving like an aggressive driver, it suddenly becomes a very passive driver and doesn't want to take the ride away when everybody's waiting for it. And I do end up having to override the accelerator pedal because there are just too many people waiting behind me. This truck to our right was also pulling a little bit into our lane, and it didn't seem to care about it at all. Little close for comfort there. We have a left turn to make ahead, and you can see the left turn signal come on, but it's very indecisive. You see it go back to the right and then to the left, and actually puts the steering wheel way too far to the left, and the truck behind us actually waits for us to go all the way into that lane, and it goes back to this lane, but keeps the steering wheel turned to the right. And as we were waiting, that same semi-truck pulls up beside us, and when we go, because our wheel is already to the right, we get really close. This definitely wasn't a comfortable experience in the car, and I went through the V12 footage and nothing noteworthy happens. It looks like a very comfortable experience. And again, just a little bit more indecisiveness before it finally gets us over into the far left lane. And here is the very last leg of the drive.
Perfect.
You can see a little bit of oddity with the steering wheel inputs here, nothing compared to version 11, but a little bit of oddity there before it decides to finally pull over, because of course version 12 is able to pull off to the side of the road when it reaches its destination. Overall, a pretty non-eventful drive for version 12 though, besides that one overtake.
Alright, let's see how long it takes AI Driver to get here.
In the end, it took me about another minute and a half or 2 minutes to get to the final destination, even though we did start out in first. And of course, since this version doesn't have the ability to pull over, as soon as it gets to the pin, it kind of just stops here in the middle of the road. But before you go anywhere, let's take a look at those results, because they are rather interesting. In the end of these two drives, version 11 ended up technically doing a 0 disengagement drive compared to version 12's 1 disengagement when it incorrectly passed a car at the stop sign. But that doesn't quite tell the whole story, does it? Because while version 12 was able to get through these drives with no interventions, aka accelerator pedal presses, version 11 needed 6 of them, and some of those I would consider pretty critical. I really did try to give the car as much leniency as possible, and trust me when I say I felt like those 6 were absolutely required. As far as human honks go, version 11 got honked at on 3 separate occasions when it wasn't taking its ride away soon enough, while version 12 had just one really long honk that was caused by taking a ride away when it wasn't its turn. So basically the complete opposite problem. And last but definitely not least is a new one on this scoreboard: comfort. After watching this video, I think it's pretty clear what car you would rather be sitting in. Version 12 had a pretty uneventful drive, and although I wasn't in the car to say for sure, I feel safe giving it a B+ in the comfort department based off the footage I went through while editing this video. Version 11, on the other hand, gets a D- and right on the verge of a complete fail. Granted, it generally does behave better than this, but keep in mind I purposely put it in situations I knew it would struggle a lot with in order to get a real test out of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really can't wait to get this on my car. Until next time, everybody. Bye.